Hey, what's good, self-direct investors? I hope you're all doing great, and I want to welcome you back to my channel. If you're new here, my name is Jordan. I'm the mind behind Make More Capital, and today we're coming at you with the midweek update in the world of cannabis. Now, before we jump in, if you enjoyed this video or you learned something, please just leave a like on it as it really helps out my channel. And of course, if you want to learn how to take advantage of this generational investment opportunity, subscribe below so that you don't miss any future videos, and there's plenty of content for you to go back, rewatch, and educate yourself with. I've tried to put all the news and facts in one place so you can watch episodes over time to learn about the evolution of the industry, identify top companies that you keep seeing pop up, and take advantage whenever you feel ready. We're going to start with some state sales data, so thank you, Hirsch Jane, for sharing this one out of Missouri. We expected 2 to 3 times the sales. We're seeing approximately 5 times the sales, so we love to hear this out of a state that recently legalized for adult use. If we had to guess, I would say sales will continue to grow, as Missouri is on track to be the fastest state to reach $1 billion in cannabis sales. So we love to hear that. This is from said article, Missouri seeing record numbers after voters make recreational cannabis legal, so you can pause to read these snippets out of this article if you'd like. First bit, recommend pause to read the second little bit as well, just relaying the sales and the breakdown. But interesting, just wanted to point this out. People have heard about it. It's legal now. Andrew says, I can try it now, even recreational. Maybe it's for me, maybe it's not. At least they have the right to choose to try because they're not harming anybody. Patton said that they've had to hire more staff to keep up with demand, which means more jobs for people in Missouri. Again, a benefit of ending cannabis prohibition. But more importantly, they saw a spike in sales during the Super Bowl and Chiefs victory parade, followed by a slight dip. But they're expecting droves of people for the NFL draft and the NCAA tournament, March Madness, both in Kansas City, Missouri. So that should help drive sales, and hopefully this trend will continue, and so I'll keep you all updated. But just wanted to share this one from Cannabis Benchmarks. As a decline in Illinois cannabis sales to out-of-state residents, i.e. Missouri, with cheaper taxes as competition grows. And so I was just going to share this to highlight, while we've seen a dip in January and February from December, which is totally normal, and we're likely going to see a jump back up in March and April in preparation for the 420 holiday, and because the nice weather in spring comes around, we are seeing some sales, or at least people going from Illinois to Missouri. And so that's a trend we're going to keep an eye on throughout the year, but just figured I'd share this if you're interested in just learning a bit more about Illinois. I think I relayed this data earlier in the month, a couple weeks back, but links below if you wanted to read a little bit more through it. Otherwise, you can just pause to read whatever I've shown. And so with that, on to Connecticut, one of the other states to recently launch their adult use program after legalizing a long time ago. But this is from the Consumer Protection website. Department of Consumer Protection releases February cannabis sales data, and it seems that adult use cannabis and medical cannabis sales totaled more than 18.4 million for the period from February 1, 2023 to February 28, so a month with just 28 days. The first complete calendar month since adult use sales began, which I believe they launched on January 10th. So we had January 10th to the end of Jan, and then February 1st to the end of February. So not a full, well, kind of a full month, but not like a 30-day month yet. But either way, despite having very few legal retail outlets, cannabis retail sales by month are going up, so which we like to see, from 5.1 million in January to 7 million in February, while medical went from 8 million to 11.4. So it is one of the few states where we see medical outpace adult use. Not exactly sure why. So let me know in the comments if you have any ideas or why you think that might be. And then a bit more total number of cannabis products sold retail. Nice to see that going out, or nice to see that going up. And ideally, as they open more legal outlets over time to try and phase out the black market and legally supply the demand, we'll see these numbers go up as well. But average product price by market, as those two go up, we are seeing these stay relatively the same, but imagine over time that's going to go down if there's more outlets to supply the demand, making the cost go down for the consumers. And so last one, medical cannabis sales passed 45 million for the first 2 months of 2023. Check out this old radio station site. Gotta love it. Just reminds me of when I grew up. And so just sharing this bit, eligible Arkansans have spent 45.2 million on medical cannabis throughout the state's 38 dispensaries during the first 2 months, not years. This is definitely a typo, of 2023. And so a total of 23.1 million was spent in January and 22.4 million in February. And so you can pause to read, and then I'm just going to slowly scroll through the total medical cannabis sales for all of the dispensaries. You can pause to read if you're interested in any individual one in Arkansas. And then just highlights at the bottom that through and through in January and February, combined, this is 4,412 pounds sold in February, not January, just February alone. And so that is out of Arkansas. A little bit more if you want to just go through that slowly and pause to read. But with that, we get on to some of the big news out of the week. Thank you, Jeff Schultz, for sharing this. The entire cannabis industry watching tech startup lose access to their deposits and capital markets turn on them. Oh, it's like tech companies are getting a taste of what it's like to be in the cannabis industry and face this discrimination regularly. Yeah, it sucks. But unlike the cannabis industry, the tech world is likely getting their bailouts if they haven't already, while the cannabis cannabis industry stuck hanging dry while Schmuck Schumer does nothing. But we are hopeful that Sherrod Brown, head of the Senate Banking Committee, will introduce a new safe banking by the end of this month, as we've been told by 2 sources. We'll have to wait and see, but that's where we're at now. And so just interesting enough to be like, yeah, oh yeah, first time facing this? Yeah, it sucks, but we've been dealing with it for a long time. And just to highlight, Synergy Canna Life does make this input. Good comment. So safe banking not passing yet is a blessing in disguise. Not sure how true that is, but funny to add down here. Ironically, the cannabis industry is well prepared and mentally conditioned to hold large amounts of physical cash. So there's a silver lining. Yeah, they've gotten good at having to deal with being targets for armed robberies and the continued violence and potential death that they face because Congress fails to do their job. Yeah, maybe we should have invested in cannabis vaults instead of stocks all along. The absurdity, but I do still think we're heading closer. As we got this news from TerraSend, so wanted to share as TerraSend has applied to list common shares on the Toronto Stock Exchange. We love to hear that, but is it easier said than done? We don't know how long this is going to take, so I want to remain critical because we've heard this in the past. But going to share the news anyways. In connection with the proposed listing and to qualify, we expect to implement an internal reorganization, which will require approval from shareholders. So again, not happening anytime soon, but we love to see the first MSO try and take that step. TerraSend applies to list common shares on the Toronto Stock Exchange. And so keep in mind, this is not in the US at all, but it's moving from the Canadian Securities Exchange up to the TSX. And so just wanted to share this from Max Mosner, as it is more of a critical take, as we should be thinking of this more critically. The longer we hear about this, the longer nothing happens. His take, even if approved, A, is structure palatable, and B, in his opinion, doesn't fix much considering custodians still aren't comfortable and the big institutional money doesn't care about the TSX. Yes, obviously we're holding out for the NYSE or the NASDAQ. That's more important where the big money is. They care about custodial services and US exchanges and frankly fundamentals. Now, is it possible that might come down the line? Of course, this could be the first step, but just wanted to share this news link. The link from TerraSend will be below, but also just wanted to share this one from Bloomberg highlighting the same news. U.S. cannabis seller TerraSend seeks Toronto exchange listing. So nice to see this being blasted through some of the mainstreams. Company would be a pioneer among multi-state operators, again, the first to apply. Plan depends on reorganization that needs shareholders' nod. So again, requires a vote, will take time, not happening anytime soon. And so just going to pause here if you wanted to read the rest of the article. It's a short one, so I'm not going to make you go grab the whole link if you don't want. And then you can pause to read this little snippet here. And then I believe this is the last of it, just if you're interested. And so links below, of course, of everything that I've shared. But wanted to share this one from Acreage, which was an interesting report. They releases an impact analysis on the New York cannabis market, proving the importance of registered organizations to market success and stabilization. Basically saying, while they wanted to screw over the MSOs as much, well, they screwed over everybody in New York, not just the MSOs, but the social equity entrepreneurs too, because there's only 3 legal shops. Main thing is by shutting out the MSOs, you've done a real harm to the industry. Sadly, you could almost call it unfixable. As the report finds, New York's current adult use cannabis draft regulations create a significant retail bottleneck and allow the illicit market to proliferate, as we've seen. So you can pause to read, otherwise the link will be below, but just the main highlights. Based on New York's current adult use existing and proposed regulations, 3 legal stores, 1,500 legal outlets supplying the demand, offering much cheaper prices, getting a slap on the wrist, and then paying their fines to continue to operate. Illicit market operators capture $7.2 billion in revenue between 2023 and 2030 due to the lack of legitimate retail outlets. Good job, New York. New York will see loss of up to 20,600 direct cannabis and ancillary jobs per year. New York will see more than $2.6 billion in state tax revenue lost over 8 years, and new licensees will open during great supply chain uncertainty, causing needless operating risks. On top of SAFE not being passed by Congress, while all these dispensaries operate in cash and are targets for armed robberies. And so SAFE is the first step, and then of course there's a lot of backtracking that needs to be done. But New York has been a funny experiment in trying to implement socialist top-down policies that really don't work in the real world, and sadly we're just seeing the consequences. And so onto some snippets from investment firms. I wanted to share this based on the news of either the TerraSend trying to apply to the TSX or greater ripple effects of the SVB collapse. And so take these all with a grain of salt, because we've seen some correct in the far past, we've seen many wrong in the near past. This is from Jeffries. MSOs on TSX, TerraSend leading the way, could be a big boost to share prices. We don't know yet. Again, the main thing to take with a grain of salt here is the word that they always use, could be a big boost. Of course, we hold out for it, but we would expect this to be approved, It could drive sizable upside in the share price, and it is likely that other MSOs will follow suit. And so you can pause to read if you want to learn more from Jeffries. This is as of March 14th, yesterday, 2023. While we've got this one, let it load. Thanks, Todd Harrison, for sharing this one also. From Cantor on the Garland 2.0 memo. Reminders, U.S. cannabis currently locked out of U.S. banking. Again, possibly a good thing in California during these times. $2 billion of deposit dollars are ready to inflow. And I don't exactly know the numbers offhand, but I believe from rough memory, 2021 was like $25 billion in total cannabis sales in the U.S. And then 2022 was up to 27 or 28 billion. So I'm not exactly sure, but think about that. With no safe, with hands tied behind their backs, and with the East Coast states taking their sweet ass times and then not even opening up enough dispensaries to properly supply the demand. And then lastly, number 3, lower rates, kiss from gods for these names. So you be the judge, but just gotta give a big shout out to Shams down here. Can't wait until the day that we can stop talking about this shit. And I do feel like the day's getting closer. Maybe this is more hopium, but the momentum does seem to be building. And so a bit more on the Cole Memo 2.0. In our view, a Cole Memo 2.0 would be enough for the stock exchanges to uplist U.S. cannabis stocks. That's an interesting take. So again, take these with a grain of salt. This is from Cantor, but this on top of seeing, the move from the CSE and to the TSX from TerraSend. Again, it might take time, but if this eventually comes, that's what we've been waiting for, and that would be very beneficial for the industry and for us as investors who've been patiently waiting. And then this last one, Todd Harrison, thank you for sharing BTIG on U.S. cannabis. Quick thoughts on cannabis overlap with SIVB fallout. So just wanted to share this. You can pause to read if you're interested on what BTIG has to say about that. And so on to the big Germany news, though, that I wanted to share. Thank you, Alfredo Pasquale, one of the sources from Germany. German Health Minister Karl Lauterbach has expressed confidence that the EU will, not could, but will approve his plan to legalize cannabis. And so, again, we're hearing this early. It's mid-March. We're expecting something closer at the end of March, but just wanted to share a bit more great news. Let's hope it all works out well. And so you can pause to read this translated snippet. Otherwise, link will be in the description. You should be able to pull that and translate it, no problem. So with that, just wanted to share, as we were nervous that the EU might not approve this, but according to Tom Blickman, seems like progress is being made as several EU states have shown initiatives to regulate cannabis cultivation and trade for recreational use. A national regulatory system for rec cannabis can be developed in accordance of the EU framework decision based on this criminal law journal saying cannabis regulation through the without right clause in Article 2.1 of the EU framework decision on illicit drug trafficking. So it seems like this could be the loophole that, gives Germany the okay and the go ahead and then allows other states to follow. Now, I don't know exactly, but just wanted to share this. If you know more about this, please let me know in the comments. But main thing to point out, which is interesting, point 4 down here, or point 3 and 4. However, the possibility is only of theoretical nature considering the clear and strict obligations ensuing from the UN Drug Control Conventions. Remember what I brought up in the last video from 1961? Yeah, we're sadly going to see that in a moment here. But however, there are options in accordance with international law, apparently. Thank goodness. 4. In order to regulate recreational cannabis within the boundaries of public international law, states can denounce the UN Narcotics Drug Conventions, which they should all do. They should all leave it ASAP. Or 2, deviate from the obligations of the UN conventions on the basis of positive human rights obligations. And the irony, keep cannabis illegal to prioritize public health, when descheduling would be prioritizing public health. Or then 5, 3, create an anyways, there's more here, but just wanted to highlight these parts here, where it seems like countries can just opt out, and that seems to be the most sensible approach, as again, the UN wants to try to police the world going forward, and yeah, I don't think anyone wants that. But thanks, Tom Engel, for sharing this. Essentially the same article on the same news, but in English from Marijuana Moment. So link will be below in the description. Some changes to the initial cannabis framework will be unveiled in the next few weeks. Love to hear that. Not could be unveiled, but will be unveiled. So we'll see when that is. Hopefully end of March, probably beginning of April. Hopefully not on April Fools. But why I mention all that is that Tom Engel shares this. How unbelievably ridiculous. The United Nations International Narcotics Control Board is suggesting that the U.S. federal government go backwards and not respect states' rights, and needs to force states within the country to repeal their cannabis legalization laws in order to maintain compliance with ridiculous, outdated global drug treaties. Like, are you fucking kidding me? In this global drug treaty, especially the one from 1961, imposed by Harry J. Anslinger, they spent 10 years working on this, essentially implemented based on fear and resentment towards the other, as opposed to exercising kindness, compassion, and common sense towards humanity. It's unbelievable. And so, again, just relaying what I mentioned in my last video about essentially what set this in motion. The 1961 stupid single convention on narcotics drugs classified cannabis as highly addictive and liable to abuse, which is certainly misleading based on a lot of the new data. And if you just replace the word cannabis with alcohol, boom, that's a lot more accurate. But it limits limits cannabis use to medical and scientific purposes. But get this, imagine these bureaucrats. We're expressing concern over the trend to legalize non-medical use of cannabis. Like, do these idiots think our endocannabinoid system differentiates whether we open a packet of rec cannabis and roll a joint? Like, that's going to make us lazy and want to eat snacks, versus if we buy, labeled medical cannabis, oh, that's going to treat our ailments and work as medicine. Like, no, cannabis is medicine. It's the only medicine so good that people use it for the side effects. These idiots have no idea, yet they're the ones trying to implement the policy and control the world through all this. It's unbelievable. Link in the description if you wanted to read. And just on that, I had to share this. Sadly, I can't access the video because as of yesterday, or since yesterday, they have unfortunately limited my ability to view their tweets. But Sam apparently invited some of their propagandists like Kevin Sabet to go speak at a conference for the UN, of course, spreading more propaganda. Fortunately, no one buys it anymore, but I had to call them out on it as he was talking about how we need to keep cannabis illegal to prevent a big marijuana industry, and then at the same time, we need to keep it illegal to prioritize public health. Of course, the status quo isn't helping. He ignores the opioid crisis, doesn't even mention it. But pathetic, modern-day Harry J. Anslinger conveniently ignoring all new data and medical health benefits, because obviously descheduling, anyone in the right mind knows, would be prioritizing public health. So I'll show you some examples in the next little snippets. But just to highlight from my last video is Anslinger may have been, as Congressman John M. Coffey labeled him in 1938, far and away the costliest man in the world. Sadly, this pathetic loser, Kevin Sabet, carries the torch forward. And more from that article, but yet Anslinger's perspective seems to live on. President Nixon, Reagan, and George Bush intensified the drug war, justifying such efforts with arguments initially developed by Anslinger, and he carries on the legacy because legit, from Nixon, Reagan, George Bush, to Clinton, Bush, Obama. You cannot make this shit up. Now, fortunately, their tweets get no traction. No one listens to them anymore, and it seems like they are just holding on for dear life as we continue to push through and eventually win this fight. But prime examples. This one from MJ Biz Daily. Link will be in the description if you wanted to read through the whole thing. But there's growing tension between licensed cannabis businesses, legal operators, and the largely unregulated hemp sector, organized crime, which is facilitated by keeping the status quo alive and not descheduling cannabis, keeping it illegal at the federal level, where companies are offering intoxicating products containing a growing array of synthetic hemp-derived cannabinoids. If you would deschedule cannabis overnight, you would be able to allocate the resources for police to go after these illegal synthetic workarounds that organized crime groups are turning to because they can, because again, they're not necessarily being penalized for it as well, or the penalties aren't necessarily as harsh as jumping through the regulatory hoops. At the same time, giving police less reasons to arrest because cannabis is no longer illegal. Anyone in prison or jail gets released because cannabis is no longer illegal. And then all states can decide what they want to do and then provide potentially jobs, tax revenue, and all that stuff through legal markets. That's obviously the simple common sense solution to a lot of these issues. And a second prime example, NORML reports, again, we've seen this many times, but tens of thousands of commercial truckers are leaving their jobs, resulting in higher prices and barren shelves, plus ridiculous wait times if what you ordered even shows up. But what's motivating this mass exodus? Look no further than the federal government's outdated policies towards cannabis. So another example, deschedule it, no longer illegal overnight, no longer a reason to test these people because we treat cannabis like alcohol or wine, as we should, because we know that it's much safer. And that way, truck drivers who are necessary for any functioning economy can live their lives and then at the end of their shift enjoy a joint much like anyone would enjoy a beer or a glass of wine. Makes no sense. And so thehill.com, link below if you wanted to read through it. But over 40,000 commercially licensed truck drivers failed federally mandated drug screens for cannabis in 2022, which is even crazier given the fact that more and more states are reforming their laws, and it's still this federal overhang getting in the way. And so while these propagandists want to continue to spread shit and keep the fear going, unfortunately, it just sucks having someone in the White House that sort of backs what they're doing, sadly. As Tom Engel shares, yikes, yeah, President Joe Biden's new budget is again proposing to keep in place a policy that blocks Washington, D.C. from making its own decisions to locally legalize cannabis sales for adult use. Therefore, what they've done now is just make it so that anyone can apply for a medical card, and then you just go get weed from the medical dispensaries in D.C. Again, Joe Biden getting in the way. This is what it looks like when you say you support D.C. statehood in order to try and get 2 more senators from your own party seated without actually supporting D.C. autonomy. And so thank you, Tom, for pointing this out. As you know, there's always usually more reasons why something gets done, and it seems like more of a political move than, again, everything is a political move and not for the move of the American people, sadly. And so on to some state news, though. Recreational cannabis bill sales through Maryland House, sales expected to begin in July. And so as we're anticipating sales to launch in July, it's just good to see that Maryland is on time. And so while there's a lot of time from now until then, it seems like it was approved in a House vote, and July 1st is when they expect to go. So the bill will now be sent to the Senate, which is moving forward with a separate measure. So pause here to read. Otherwise, if you wanted to read a little bit more, you can pause here, otherwise link in the description, but I think I covered most of that. Well, we've got some other developments from states where we might not expect it, so thanks Marijuana Moment for highlighting. Kentucky Senate Committee approves medical cannabis legalization bill, and so hey, Mitch McConnell's own Kentucky allowing medical to fly. Nice to see this happen. So it now heads to the Senate floor with just days left in the session, and if you wanted to learn more about the bill, here's what SB 47 would accomplish. And so you can pause to read. Again, medical only, not for adult use yet, but big step for Kentucky. You can pause to read the snippet here. And then last bit, you can pause to read as well. Otherwise, of course, link in the description. While we've got something out of Minnesota as well. Marijuana Moment, thank you. Minnesota senators approve major overhaul of cannabis legalization bill with House previewing similar move. And so while we've anticipated Minnesota to hopefully act before April, seems like they're keeping their word, which we like to see. Another pair of Minnesota House and Senate committees approve legislation to legalize cannabis for adult use in the state, with the latter panel adopting a major overhaul on the measure. The quote, Minnesotans are ready for this change. Stevenson told House colleagues current cannabis laws are doing more harm than good, and Minnesotans deserve the freedom and respect to make their own decisions about cannabis. 100%. It's the American way. And so just wanted to scroll down to the bottom. There's a lot of talk and snippets here. But if you are interested, oh my gosh. A lot of ads. But here are the main components of the revised cannabis legalization bills, HF 100 and SF 73. And so you can pause to read. If you want to learn more about the bills in Minnesota, you can pause to read as well. And then lastly, on to some studies. High Time shares this. No, one more state news. After state of Georgia issued a grand total of 6 medical cannabis licenses, it was sued by denied businesses. And so how do you solve this? You appease the denied businesses who sued by handing out more licenses, as apparently this bill would address those lawsuits. Georgia House passes a bill to increase medical pot licenses. And so while we've seen Georgia trying to get their medical program launched, lawsuits have gotten in the way. A House bill was recently approved to increase the number of medical cannabis licenses in Georgia. Hopefully that will appease those that sued them, and then they can get on with actually launching this program so those in Georgia can get access to a safer, non-addictive medicinal alternative, and we'll see less deaths from opioids. And so on to some studies, though. This one from the American Journal of Preventive Medicine. Increasing use of cannabis for medical purposes among U.S. residents from 2013 to 2020. And so no doubt, as more states reform their laws, first for medical before they go rec, we see more people turn to a safer, non-addictive medicinal alternative because they can. And the objective of this study was to evaluate temporal trends and correlates of cannabis use for medicinal purposes in the U.S. And so the results, the prevalence of U.S. residents using cannabis for medicinal purposes increased significantly from just 1.2% in 2013 to 2014 to 2.5% in 2019 to 2020. So out of the American population, I'm very curious how much that represents, but it's so little, meaning there's so much more market share that cannabis as a medicine can capture from big pharma once the floodgates open and once descheduled. And so in the multivariable adjusted model, living in a state that legalized medical cannabis remains significantly associated with medical cannabis use, obviously because they have access and because they can. And so it makes a big difference when you give people access to that non-addictive medicinal alternative. And happy to share this one from High Times study, cannabis linked with higher quality of life in chronic illness patients. Researchers found that it aids sleep and anxiety-related symptoms for those dealing with chronic illnesses, as obviously sleep and anxiety are some of the most annoying things to deal with on a basis. And if cannabis can help you shift your perception of how you perceive it and make it more bearable, then it can go a long way. Again, as a medicine, lots to learn as we deschedule it. But a new study out of Great Britain suggests what I just mentioned above. The study, published in the Expert Review of Clinical Pharmacology, analyzed 2,833 patients who were enrolled in the UK Medical Cannabis Registry, and they wrote that the study suggests that cannabis-based medicinal products are associated with an improvement in health-related quality of life in UK patients with chronic diseases, and that treatment was tolerated well by most participants, but adverse events were common in female and cannabis-naive patients. Of course, you need to educate people, but I think those are worth considering. And again, highlighting why descheduling is something we ought to do sooner than later in the U.S. And so you can pause to read more on the information here. Otherwise, of course, you can grab the link below and read through it yourself. While last study, medical cannabis for chronic non-malignant pain management. This one from March as well, so fairly new. Highlighting the purpose of the review, cannabis has been used since ancient times for medical and rec research. This review article will document the validity of how medical cannabis can be utilized for chronic non-malignant pain management. And so it doesn't feature the whole article, of course, but recent findings, current cannabis research has shown that medical cannabis is indicated for symptom management for many conditions not limited to cancer, chronic pain, headaches, migraines, and psychological disorders such as anxiety and post-traumatic stress disorder. So to jump down, research regarding pain management is limited within the U.S. as the Drug Enforcement Agency classifies it as a Schedule I drug. Unfortunately, and they're very wrong in doing so, few studies have found a limited relationship between chronic pain and medical cannabis use. If few have found a limited relationship, means that most studies have found a positive relationship between chronic pain and medical cannabis use. A total of 77 articles were selected after a thorough screening process using PubMed and Google Scholar. This paper demonstrates that medical cannabis use provides adequate pain management. Boom, deschedule. Enough said. Patients suffering from chronic non-malignant pain may benefit from medical cannabis due to its convenience and efficacy. And so no wonder Big Pharma wants to lobby to keep it illegal, because they know once the federal overhang is gone, the floodgates are going to open, and they're going to lose a lot of market share to this miracle plant. It is what it is. And with that, just a reminder, we've got a few big weeks ahead as MSOs will continue to release their Q4 earnings. I believe Cresco and Verano go tomorrow, and then Curaleaf is on the 28th. At the same time, we wait for Germany to unveil their planned legislation for adult use. Now, of course, they're not going to pass it anytime soon, but at least introducing it is the first step. And then we've had two sources say that by the end of March, hopefully Sherrod Brown, the Senate Banking Committee chairman, will introduce a safe Safe Banking Act version. Again, not pass it, but possibly introduce it, because of course, the longer you don't solve that problem, it just exacerbates and needs a solution. And so that is it for today's episode, folks. So I want to thank you so much for tuning in, and really hope you got some value out of today's episode. What did you think of the stories mentioned? Let me know in the comments if you have any questions or suggestions, and I'd be happy to address them. But besides that, if you enjoyed this video and you learned something, please just leave a like on it. Subscribe below if you don't want to miss any future videos, and I will catch you on Sunday for This Week in Cannabis News. Have a great week, everybody.